Hello to all in TU Dublin, and thanks to Ken Boyle for inviting me again to give my thoughts on COP27. As has become typical, this COP was characterised by being both a fruitful compromise, but also frustrating gridlock, so somewhere in the middle. I mean, the United States went to Sharm el-Sheikh refusing to even discuss the possibility of compensation for the developing world. But just 2 weeks later, they had signed on to the European Union's proposal establishing a joint loss and damage facility. Unfortunately, that facility is an empty vessel. It will have to wait until next year before it sees any funding commitments from major governments, but it is a serious step in the right direction. On other issues, progress was even slower. China and the Gulf states repeatedly blocked commitments to reduce fossil fuel consumption, for example. And perhaps worst of all, the language which was included at the last minute, which seemed to encourage the burning of fossil gas. So the muddling through has been typical of the COP summits over the years. And believe it or not, last year's Glasgow summit was the first time fossil fuels had even been acknowledged as a source of climate change in a COP agreement. This is the pace of change you face when you're trying to reach consensus between 194 disparate countries. But that's precisely why we must double down on climate action now that COP is over. The EU and Ireland may not have the same global influence outside of COP, but we can move much faster when we're not trying to pull the rest of the world with us. Investment in renewable energy by the rich world has already led to a tenfold decrease in the price of solar power over the last decade. And this helps the developing world by making it economically feasible to transition to renewables early on in their development path. In other words, by paying for carbon mitigation today, we can avoid paying for disaster relief tomorrow. Our policy needs to focus on generating more energy revolutions like this. I spoke to you before the COP about the European Green Deal, which includes a commitment to reducing our emissions by 55% by 2030 from 1990. And as part of this effort, I'm currently leading negotiations on a revision to the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, or the EPBD, which aims to decarbonise our built environment. Buildings are important for rich countries like the EU, but they're even more important for the developing nations who attended COP27. China currently pours more concrete every few years than America did in the entire 20th century. And if other low-carbon, low-income countries follow the same path, the resultant emissions will be a major driver of climate catastrophe, and we've got to call it like it is. So the EPBD has the potential to jumpstart innovation in green building materials, which will be essential for low-income countries looking to build up their economies. But just as at COP, lobbyists are working furiously behind the scenes to reduce the scope and the ambition of this legislation. It's fights like this, occurring in nations and institutions around the world, which set the stage for the annual COP conferences. And the more ambition each individual country takes today, the easier it will be to reach agreement when we all come together. So yes, this year's COP was disappointing, but we can get to work today to make sure that COP28, taking place in Dubai, does not replicate the same old failures. That will require leadership from those of us in Europe, but also from my colleagues in Leinster House. But it will also require the passion and ambition of young people like yourselves to make these policies a reality. And I think together we can make cheap, clean energy a political winner, and in the process save ourselves and the developing world from climate catastrophe. Thank you.